My name is Jonathan Reed. I'm 67 years old. And if there's one thing life has taught me, it's that the people who underestimate you are usually the ones who end up learning the biggest lessons. And that truth hit harder than ever the night my own daughter-in-law tried to treat me like someone who didn't belong anywhere near my family, let alone in a VIP section of an event I had secretly funded long before she ever joined our lives. The whole thing started when my son, Mark, invited me to his company's annual charity gala, a big fancy event held in a downtown hotel ballroom, the kind with chandeliers the size of small planets and ticket prices that made your eyebrows hit your hairline. But I didn't mind because I loved supporting my son's accomplishments and showing up for him the way I always had, even back when I was working 14-hour days to make sure he had a future brighter than mine. When I arrived at the hotel that evening, wearing my old gray suit, the same one I'd worn to Mark's college graduation, Mark waved at me from the entrance. Happy and proud? What, his wife, Vanessa, turned her head and whispered something to him before forcing a stiff smile my way. The kind of smile people give when they're pretending to be polite but can't hide the irritation underneath. I greeted her warmly anyway, but she didn't return the warmth, instead stepping closer to me and saying quietly, "Jonathan, just so you know, tonight's VIP section is very exclusive, and it's mostly for important guests, donors, executives, people who matter, so maybe you should sit in the general seating area so there's no confusion." And for a second, I thought I misheard her because surely she wasn't implying I didn't matter, but her tone made it clear that, yes, she absolutely believed I didn't. And Mark didn't correct her. Instead, he mumbled, "Yeah, Dad, maybe it's better if you sit over there. It'll be less crowded," and pointed toward the far back of the room where the regular seats were. I felt something sting deep in my chest, the kind of hurt that only your own family can inflict, but I just nodded and said, "Sure, no problem," because I had learned long ago that arguing only exposes your dignity to people who don't deserve to see it. As I walked toward the general seating area, a few attendees gave me those quick, dismissive glances older people sometimes get, like they assume you're someone's driver, or a lost guest, or an extra body that doesn't belong, but I kept my head high and took a seat near the aisle, watching the beautifully decorated VIP tables fill up with executives, partners, and donors who were being served wine and appetizers while Vanessa and Mark chatted with the directors at the front. I stayed quiet, folding my hands, reminding myself that sometimes respect comes slowly, sometimes not at all. But the truth always finds a way to rise, except that tonight it didn't just rise. It exploded into the room like a spotlight falling from the ceiling. About 20 minutes into the event, the host walked up to the stage, adjusted her microphone, and began welcoming everyone, thanking teams and sponsors, calling out important names, and the more she spoke, the more I saw Vanessa glancing toward the stage nervously, like she was afraid of being forgotten, while Mark smiled proudly. Then the host cleared her throat and said, "Tonight, before we begin, we must honor the person who made this entire event possible, the one whose generous donation funded our mentorship program, supported our scholarship fund, and helped us reach a record number of families this year." And the room grew quiet, forks freezing mid-air, heads turning toward the VIP tables expecting the name of some wealthy executive or prominent donor. But instead, the host smiled brightly and said into the microphone, "Please help me welcome our keynote supporter and honored guest, Mr. Jonathan Reed." For a second, I thought I'd imagined my name echoing across the ballroom, like a bell ringing through a church, but when the spotlight swung toward the general seating area where I sat, people literally turned in their chairs to stare at me, their eyes wide, their expressions shifting from confusion to recognition to shock. Vanessa's jaw dropped so fast she looked like she might faint, and Mark's face went completely still, his smile dissolving into something like horror. Because now the entire room understood that the man they had casually sent to the back, the man they didn't want anywhere near the VIPs, was the man whose money and support had made this entire night even possible. The host repeated warmly, "Mr. Reed, please join us on stage," and I stood up slowly as people around me gasped, clapped, and moved out of the way to let me pass. some even shaking my hand as I walked by, whispering things like, "I had no idea," and "Thank you for your generosity." Meanwhile, Vanessa sat frozen, her face pale, her mouth trembling as she looked between me and the stage, like she had just realized she'd insulted the wrong person, not just morally, but socially and in front of hundreds of people. I walked up the steps to the stage as the host shook my hand proudly, telling the crowd how my contribution over the past few years had quietly sustained programs that helped thousands of young people, how I never sought recognition, how I donated humbly without ever asking to be seen, and the applause that followed was loud enough to feel like thunder rolling through the ballroom. As I stood there, the spotlight warm on my shoulders, I saw Mark look down at his hands, ashamed, and Vanessa stare at the floor, her face burning red. And for the first time that evening, I didn't feel small. I felt seen, respected, valued, the way a man should feel after spending an entire lifetime working hard to help others. When the applause died down, the host handed me the mic and said, "Please, share a few words," and though I'm not much of a speechmaker, I cleared my throat and spoke from a place deep in my chest. I'm honored to be here tonight. But more than anything, I'm grateful. Not for recognition, but for the chance to see something meaningful grow from what little I've been able to give. You see, you don't help others to be noticed, you do it because someone once helped you. And it's your turn to pass it on. The room was silent, hanging on every word. But I didn't look toward Vanessa or Mark, not yet, because the speech wasn't for them. It was for the people who believed in kindness even when no one is watching. When I finished, the applause filled the room again. And as I stepped off the stage, the senior directors rushed forward to shake my hand, thanking me personally, offering me a seat at the VIP table, the one Vanessa had forbidden me from sitting in, and they insisted I sit at the very front beside the CEO, who immediately began discussing future plans with me. Meanwhile, Vanessa stood awkwardly behind the table, not sure whether to sit, stand, apologize, or disappear. She tried to smile at me, but her smile was brittle like thin glass under pressure. And when she finally approached, she whispered stiffly, "Jonathan, I didn't know." And I looked at her calmly and said, "You don't treat people kindly because you know who they are. You treat them kindly because of who you are." And she swallowed hard because she understood exactly what I meant. Mark came over next, quieter than I'd seen him in years, and muttered, "Dad." "I'm sorry," but I simply patted his shoulder and replied, "Just remember, your value doesn't decrease because someone fails to see it. But their character does," and he nodded slowly, knowing the lesson wasn't just about tonight, it was about every small moment leading up to it. I enjoyed the rest of the evening seated among executives, donors, and leaders who treated me with respect and warmth, not because of money, but because they valued humility and contribution, things Vanessa had failed to notice the moment she looked at my old suit and made assumptions. When the event ended, dozens of people lined up to shake my hand, thank me, and ask for future collaboration. And as I walked out of the ballroom, I realized that life has a beautiful way of creating justice without revenge sometimes. All you need to do is simply let the truth be seen in the right light. And that night, the light was brighter than ever.